Hello and welcome back to the Master Division of the Intermezzo Championship. Two games of the season have already finished and you have already seen them on the two videos before. And as you can see at the moment I'm at the top of my division or my league with 10 points out of two games. I managed to win the two games, which I'm very happy about. However, in those two games I didn't play against funestus yet, and funestus, at least how it is looking at the moment, might be the biggest contender for getting the promotion back into Grandmaster again, because he is only 1.5 points behind me. Had actually one game where he had a tie for the first place, interestingly. And now the next game that we will be seeing today will actually involve him and also RutgerHauer. So it could be very nice to maybe, of course, ideally get a win, but maybe also manage to finish before funestus to get an even bigger lead against him. On the other hand, for funestus, if he manages to place before me in this game, he will overtake me in the standings, and I then have to fight back in the second batch of games. So that is the situation, and now without further ado, we will take a look at the game. I am playing in the second position in this game. Funestus is playing in the first position, and first of all we can take a look at the leaders and wonders. And we can see some lab synergy in H3 with Einstein and Sid Meier, but not the most lab synergy. We have some culture leaders with Fleming and Chaplin. There's also Gandhi to potentially hide behind. We have Pierre, who's of course very important to maybe consider which solution you want to have for the happy faces. Also Mandela is there. We have Red Cross, which is a wonder that is nice to have in mind. The Internet and Manhattan Project are there, also fast food chains. In H2 we have quite some interesting wonders with the Suez Canal. There's also Cook in the game, so colonization could definitely be a nice strategy. We have the Ocean Liner service together with Maria Theresa, which is a very nice combination. We also have the Harvard College as a very strong wonder. Then we have Newton as a strong economic leader, and Nobel also as a strong science leader, Bach and Ogodi as culture leaders, and also Robespierre to have one military action leader and to maybe go for a low science strategy potentially. In H1 we have the two science wonders with Silk Road and Universitas, then there are the two happy face solution wonders with St. Peter's Basilica and Forbidden City, and there's also the Great Wall. We have no military action leader in H1, we do have Saladin as a very solid leader, Columbus, Eleanor, Isabella could maybe all be nice to go for potentially a nice colonization game. We have Genghis Khan and Nostradamus to help with the strength, and then Michelangelo as a maybe a bit situational leader, but of course as one with a lot of potential. Funestus is in first position. He will just pick the engineering genius. I think it's not unlikely that he will get one of those leaders at the next turn, and maybe will also be able to go for one of those wonders. Now it is my turn, and there are some different leaders in the row. There are also some wonders that I could potentially take. However, maybe the most interesting wonders are available in 3 civil actions, and maybe it could be beneficial to leave myself open to them. And also, if there are wonders like Silk Road and Universitas in the game, I try to maybe go for rather leader first than for wonder, because if the situation will be that maybe one of those wonders will be revealed very early, I could get heavily rewarded with going for a very strong H1 wonder as my first wonder. And now, with those interesting wonders still being in the row, I made a decision to go for Cleopatra. I could just go for Cleopatra, and also for wonder like the Hanging Gardens or the Colossus, I could maybe go for the Hanging Gardens. Maybe it's the chance that I can pick up this rich land at my next turn. And then I can maybe go for a Cleo activation every turn, or using a resource every turn without delaying my production, which could be nice. But I can also just take Cleo Urban Growth now, and I'm actually guaranteed to get one of those 3 wonders. Even if maybe Pyramids and Library are taken, then I could still be fine with the Acropolis. I have the Urban Growth, so that also allows me to use Cleo's resources very nicely every turn without delaying my production. And I leave myself open to maybe, for example, RutgerHauer rather wanting to have a leader under wonder already, or maybe Funestus not being willing to pick a wonder for 2 civil actions, because in order for the Library and the Pyramids being taken away, RutgerHauer now just has to take a wonder, and Funestus has to take the other wonder for 2 civil actions, so at least it would require my opponents some actions. So I will just go for Cleo and Urban Growth. I could of course also consider to just go for Aristotle and Hippocrates, but I do think that Cleo plus the one resource or science, depending on how I will use it, but with Cleo it will be a resource basically anyway, because very likely I will go for the lab first anyway. I do think that makes Cleo stronger here, especially with knowing that I have a nice wonder to work with her. RutgerHauer will just go for the Pyramids, which I do think is a fair pick. Definitely nice to have that wonder. It might, of course, mean that maybe his leader options could be a bit limited. Funestus could now go for Hippocrates, and even if he doesn't, if he goes for Aristotle, Hippocrates will be discarded. So you can see Caesar and Confucius are revealed for RutgerHauer to potentially take, but sadly Confucius was revealed as the last HA card, meaning I, even with going for the Acropolis, can let Confucius stay on 2 civil actions now for RutgerHauer, which is maybe a bit annoying for him. Funestus just went for taking Aristotle in hand and also picking the library for 2, so the wonder that is now left for me is the Acropolis, but also as you can see there are actually 2 H1 wonders coming down the row, St. Peter's Basilica and the Great Wall. And I definitely at least considered if I maybe should just build a lab now, just doing some relatively normal stuff, electing Cleo, building my lab, increasing population, and then maybe just taking this copy of Richland, and then maybe going for St. Peter's Basilica or Great Wall at the next turn. I do think Great Wall has a lot of potential. Of course, there's also a lot of potential damage when the Ravages of Time is revealed relatively early. And there are also some other interesting wonders that I could still get, like Forbidden City. I do think Acropolis and Forbidden City is a somewhat nice combination, because with Acropolis you want to go for an H1 government form ideally, and if you do this, then it's nice to get an additional civil action so that the H1 government form more nicely serves as a long-term solution. And also the 2 ignored unhappy workers from the Forbidden City may be allowed to put more workers into urban buildings to then again get a bigger discount out of the Acropolis. So I think a smart little combination, and then also Silk Road and Universitas I think are very fine wonders to have. And with that, I made a decision to not wait for those wonders. Also with picking a wonder already now, maybe I will be a bit more flexible for the next turn. And so I, at the end, was just very fine with getting the Acropolis here. There's a leader like Bach in the game, Gandhi to potentially hide behind. So maybe going for a little bit of a greedy culture strategy could still be a very viable strategy, even though we are not in a 2-player game. RutgerHauer goes for building a mine, increasing his population, and interestingly he's not willing to go for Confucius for an additional civil action, which I guess is fair enough. Confucius in last position can be a little bit tricky. I think maybe I would still be willing to go for him, but he rather just wants to have some additional draws, maybe being able to seed some additional cards into the deck. With the pyramids, I don't like Caesar too much, because you maybe don't necessarily want to the event deck to flip relatively quickly, because ideally you want to rush out the pyramids and focus on your economy and not in building up some strength, but getting some additional draws and having a bit more control over the event deck might still be nice at the end. Funestus goes for Aristotle, will increase his population, but not yet. He will just build 2 steps of the library, then increase his population, which I think makes a lot of sense. He delays his lab, but if he builds the lab, there are not really that interesting cards to take for him. So just using his civil actions more efficiently, also being able to have a free population while also not being in consumption yet, I do think are nice enough reasons to just delay the lab for now and start working on the library, even though the library he can't finish the library already this turn. Now it's my turn. I will now build the 3rd mine, build 1 step of the Acropolis, and I do think this turn is relatively clear. Maybe some crazy folks would go just for Saladin here or something, but I think it's a very solid turn to just build my lab, build my mine, build 1 step of the Acropolis, and then take the alchemy. I do think the cards for 1 civil action are not that interesting. If I take one of them and then increase my population, I go very early into consumption, which I don't like, and then I just think the alchemy makes a lot of sense, giving me something to invest my resource into to upgrade my economy, and also at the same time making it that I can use Cleo's resources even more often at the following turns. So I do think that is just a very nice turn, using Cleo's resource with building that step, getting my mine production going into the next turn, now being able to go for alchemies and increase my science production. I draw 2 events, 2 cards, the Good Harvest and also the Heavy Cavalry. Maybe Genghis Khan could still be available at my next turn, and maybe it could be an option to take him in hand. RutgerHauer seeds with Caesar, seeds even 2 times, has drawn 2 events. The development of trade routes and development of settlements are open. He will then build a 2nd lab, goes for Saladin. Taking Saladin at my turn would have denied him from RutgerHauer, but I do think it would have just been way too expensive. But there are some players out there who really value the early civil action quite highly, and RutgerHauer will now switch from Caesar to Saladin. I do think that makes a lot of sense. At least he seeded now 2 times, has a little bit of event knowledge, and now is able to go for Saladin, and with that get some economical value immediately. When he then will finish the pyramids, he will have 6 civil actions available, which definitely gives him the room to maybe do a lot of nice stuff potentially. He then takes the bread and circuses in hand. That means that Genghis Khan will be discarded before my next turn, but that is, I think, a very nice pickup for him, especially with Pierre being in the game. Funestus offers the naval trade agreement to RutgerHauer. He wants to have the additional blue tokens, meaning RutgerHauer will now get the additional colonization force. He will actually accept it. Maybe he has already seeded a colony into the deck, or maybe he has some enhanced. There is a Suez Canal and Cook in the game, so maybe he thought at the end the additional colonization force could do something at some point. Funestus will build a library, finish the library, builds the second lab, which he can just exactly do thanks to the development of trade routes that have been revealed, is now 3 science production, takes the irrigation, scoring 1 science with Aristotle, and then takes the rich land. Now it is my turn. I also think this turn is relatively clear again. I make the decision to not seed because I have maybe some corruption issues, and also for now I don't have a nice tactic, so I don't necessarily want to move the deck forward relatively quickly, and those events might also not be that nice for me if Funestus maybe goes for irrigation and RutgerHauer was one of my opponents for this early iron. So I will now go for the alchemy, making use out of Cleo's resources, getting my science production going, increasing my population to get out of corruption, and then I have 1 civil action left, and I do think it just makes a lot of sense to now use my chance to get a military tech, get the knights for 1 civil action. Using the heavy cavalry might be a bit difficult maybe. I will actually decide to still keep it in hand, because who knows, maybe if there's some more food revealed from the developments, maybe I can manage to get 3 knights going, but I have still the chance to maybe draw another knight's tactic, and it's just nice to have this option available and also deny the option from one of your opponents to go for maybe some potentially stronger tactics. I could maybe consider Eleanor, but I do think there are some other interesting leaders that I could go for. Nostradamus, Isabella could be decent. If I draw a colony, Columbus could be very interesting with the Suez Canal being in the game. And with that I just picked the knights, and I do think that was a very solid turn. I actually keep the colonization card and the tactic, draw another colonization card and also another tactic, the phalanx tactic, which is probably a lot easier to use for me. I was very happy to draw that. RutgerHauer seeds, opens the development of agriculture, can't finish the pyramids yet, was maybe hoping for some additional resources to be revealed. He will increase his population 2 times, takes the breakthrough for some additional science, which I think makes a lot of sense, and then also will go for the masonry, also a pickup that I definitely respect, because he didn't finish his HA wonder yet, and with having pyramids and Saladin, the Silk Road will be an incredibly strong wonder for him, and then having the masonry is of course even stronger, also for those H2 wonders, Suez Canal, Ocean Liner Service, the masonry could be very nice to have. So I do think it's a very strong pickup for him here. Now it's Funestus' turn. He will go for the monarchy, scoring 1 science with Aristotle, getting more civil actions going immediately. Sadly, he is also willing to go for the iron, even though it means that he has to build a warrior to get out of corruption, but maybe didn't want to leave me with the early iron. I could potentially maybe just go for 1 iron upgrade, finish the Acropolis to use Leo's resources and have a very fine turn for myself. Funestus with building this warrior is at least the strongest for now, and the event deck is not that far away from flipping. Now it's my turn. I will increase my population, and then this turn, the turn is maybe not that straightforward as before. I made a decision. Increasing my population is basically necessary to get out of corruption. Or I guess maybe I could actually go for finishing the Acropolis and go for 1 lab upgrade, and with 5 food I would still not be in corruption. But I at the end came to the conclusion that I want to use my civil actions in my civilization anyway. There are maybe some cards on the 2 civil action area that I could consider. The Code of Laws maybe, with my good science production, Nostradamus to have a very solid leader, with not knowing how nice Columbus or Isabella will be for me. Isabella, of course, I could just be solid, but Nostradamus maybe a little bit stronger, but I also have only 2 military actions, no event cards in hand for now. So I made a decision that I don't want to take any of those cards for 2 civil actions, and then I just will use some civil actions in my civilization. Now I definitely want to use Cleo's resources. There's an Engineering Genius 1 available for 1 civil action, which I do think is a very nice card to get. There are some very interesting H2 wonders. They're still in Universitas, so I do think chances are relatively high that I will be able to use it. There's also a cartography. RutgerHauer did at least accept this Naval Trade Agreement pact for the colonization force. There's a Suez Canal in the game, so if I draw some colonies myself, maybe I could pull off a nice colonization game, but with not having any knowledge about colonies, I at the end made a decision against the cartography and just wanted to only take the Engineering Genius, and after that rather be a bit more flexible on my next turn and already finish the Acropolis this turn, which will of course mean that I won't be able to use Cleo's resources at the next turn as easily. And Yeah, so I could maybe consider to get out of corruption building a warrior, which I might need anyway with the phalanx tactic. However, if then there's a development of warfare revealed, it could be a bit annoying. So maybe it has also some benefits to not commit this worker yet. And yeah, and also I thought maybe it's fine to not use the engineering genius. I mean, if I use the engineering genius in the second step, then I can't use Clio again anyway. And so, but it could be nice to maybe use Clio at the next turn. But then I would need to spend one more civil action on something. Maybe it could be fine to take the cartography, but at the end I made the decision to rather be a bit more flexible. I might still need to pick a leader at my next turn, and so I just finished the Acropolis already. If the Silk Road isn't taken by RutgerHauer, then there might be the chance that I can just go for the Silk Road, even though the Engineering Genius one of course doesn't work ideally with it, but getting 2 resources for 1 civil action could still be a fine deal if I had to make the decision to in the end use it on the Silk Road. And so I yeah, at the end went for this turn. However, I did expect that maybe RutgerHauer will now just go for the Silk Road. I will reveal the phalanx tactic already, making it that I can keep both of those colonization cards in hand. There's a Suez Canal in the game. RutgerHauer maybe could be incentivized to seed some colonies now, especially if the cartography, when the cartography is now gone. So with that, I thought maybe it could be nice to keep as many defense cards as possible. RutgerHauer offers a trade routes agreement to funestus, wants to use food as resources, but funestus makes the decision to reject the pact. RutgerHauer develops the masonry with the breakthrough, which makes it that he has still 6 science left, finishes the pyramids, has 3 civil actions left, and I do think it could just be very, very interesting to just go for the Silk Road here. Yeah, just a very cheap wonder that gives a lot of benefits. So I do think that I maybe in his position would have just gone for it. So he misses out on the swordsman, but there are still some other military techs left. He on the makes now the decision to go for the Code of Laws, and that on the other hand I don't know how much I like it, because he has already 6 civil actions, now he will go up to 7, but he's now very low in science, can't easily invest into upgrades, and will maybe get quite difficult to get into government form apart from doing a revolution. At least there's Robespierre in the game, so maybe he will give him a big boost at some point. Of course the civil action can be nice, maybe he didn't want to leave the card Funestus who has Aristotle, but he also has some other cards that he maybe wants to invest the science into, so I'm not sure how much I like this Code of Laws play, and I think I would have just gone for the Silk Road here. RutgerHauer then goes for the irrigation and also the swordsman. That makes it that the Silk Road will definitely be discarded before his next turn. Funestus seeds, the development of planning is opened, and the options for that are development of markets, civil life, and warfare. So maybe the civil life could be the strongest, even though the warfare, of course, also could be considered. Funestus makes the decision to go for Nostradamus, takes the breakthrough, goes for an upgrade, goes for a second upgrade, increases his population, so just a very solid turn for him. He then plays the Legion tactic to maybe use the military action already. Now it is my turn. I can't use my politics phase. And I this turn will just go for the monarchy. I have the Acropolis, and also I will make the decision to go for Columbus this turn, and with getting a 3rd military action there's just a lot higher chance that I will maybe get a colony. Of course I don't have any colony yet, but with the Suez Canal, Columbus has just such a big potential, and I know now that I at least get a civil action back from from Cleopatra. Well, if I go for Isabella, then I maybe have to pay an additional, maybe even 2 if she is on a very awkward spot, and I already lose some civil actions. Of course, I also lose a civil action if I use Columbus for a colony, but that at least would mean that I actually got a colony, and if I don't get a colony, I can maybe at least, he saved me 1 or even 2 civil actions, but just for the chance that I get a colony, and then maybe the Suez Canal out of the sudden could be an interesting option. I made a decision to go for Columbus here. I do take the monarchy here, and of course it could be an interesting consideration to maybe use now Cleo's resources to build either a 3rd lab, which could be interesting, or maybe the religion. There's now only 1 development left, so the development of religion hasn't been revealed yet. So I do think that could be interesting, then develop the monarchy for 1 science cheaper. However, at the end I made a decision to go for something different, and I'm actually not sure if I do approach this turn correctly. I will make the decision to not go for any religion. I will take Columbus. Now you could say that maybe it's nice to not build this religion, because then I have 2 civil actions left to take the iron, which could still be an interesting card. I can start developing it at the next turn, and then I maybe have some iron production. With that can a lot easier afford to strong H2 wonders that I can potentially get an H2. So I do think that could be a very interesting consideration. However, I made a different decision. I instead made a decision to rather use some military actions already now. I will build a warrior, and I will take the urban growth. Building the warrior means that I use first of all a military action already now, meaning I will get more H2 draws, meaning a higher chance for an H2 colony for Columbus, and also some H2 tactics, of course. And with building this warrior, which I maybe want to do anyway, the event deck will now flip, and maybe there could be some strength events coming, so maybe I want to be concerned about my strength anyway, and maybe that means that I want to build a knight at the next turn, so that I can again increase my strength, maybe also to actually be a little bit threatening, because RutgerHauer is very low in science, has only 2 military actions. He can of course take the strength from Saladin, but maybe it could be a bit annoying for him if I go for a little bit of military. And then I spend some resource anyway, meaning I can't get quickly into iron. Then the iron will be relatively late anyway, and so I actually here made the decision to not take it, which actually caught me a bit by surprise when I now took a review at this game. But I mean, if I want to increase my military now a little bit to be just set for the event deck, then the iron will just be very slowly upgraded. RutgerHauer can of course not take it, but he can't go for it quickly anyway, so it might stay in his hand for a while anyway. And then there are just 2 copies of coal, which maybe will end up being more efficient. I have my government form already, my science production's fixed, so I don't have a lot of things that I still need to fix in H2, and can maybe allow myself the luxury to wait for the coal and then go for the coal if I maybe don't get the coal quickly. With Columbus, there's at least a chance that maybe the Suez Canal could be an option with the engineering genius to fix my resource production, and so I just rather went for an urban growth directly, which at some point, especially with the Acropolis, I maybe at some point it could just be nice to build an urban building. And now, with wanting to build this warrior, I can't that easily use resources, so a bit of an awkward turn, and I'm not sure if I actually do the right decision here. I do not go for the Silk Road, something I didn't talk about, but as much as I love the Silk Road, Engineering Genius 1 is not ideal with it, and there are just so many strong H2 wonders. With Columbus, the Suez Canal could be a real option, especially now that I draw the strategic territory, which I was very happy about. And then I just didn't want to block myself from those potentially strong wonders like Ocean Liner Service, Harvard College, or Suez Canal. And also I don't have the most civil actions, at least 5, so Silk Road I do think could be a fine wonder here. But with those strong H2 wonders, I didn't want to block my wonder slot here. RutgerHauer will go for the irrigation. Thanks to the development of Civil Life, he was able to develop the irrigation for only 2 signs, making it that he can actually spend some civil actions at least on upgrading his civilization. He then is willing to pay 3 civil actions for the cultural heritage, noticing that he is relatively low in science and that every bit of additional science could be very valuable. Then he takes, after building the warrior, to get a little bit stronger, he will take the iron and also the alchemy, giving him some options to upgrade. Thanks to the cultural heritage, he can actually start going for the alchemy already at the next turn, and those upgrades will be relatively cheap with having the masonry. But we can see that going for the Code of Laws and leaving himself at such low science maybe was also a bit awkward. Otherwise, maybe he could have just gone for iron already this turn, or alchemy, instead of having to go for irrigation first, which maybe is fine, but also maybe not that much needed. So I do think that this investing into Code of Laws was leaves him now at a little bit of a tricky position, but maybe if he starts going for alchemy at the next turn, and with all of those civil actions, he can still maybe manage to build up a strong position, and maybe if he gets a nicely timed Robespierre, he then can out of the sudden get an incredibly strong boost to his position, maybe play then the late part of the game with an enormous amount of civil actions, so definitely still a lot of potential with his many civil actions that he's having. Funestus Seeds, the development of science is revealed, which I was not too happy to see, because it now allows Funestus to go for the Code of Laws, and also RutgerHauer, of course, really maybe likes to see this additional science revealed. I do think it helps him out quite a bit, while for me the science is not really that relevant, so I would have hoped to maybe get a different development, but it's also, of course, not. I mean, it's a bit annoying, but no, that's just something normal, so no need to be annoyed by that. Funestus will just take Swordsman and Breton Xerxes, also maybe wanting to be set up for Pierre, still needs a happy face solution, so I do think that makes a lot of sense. Will build a warrior to be the strongest, maybe could be an indicator for some strength events coming, and then ends his turn. And as you can see, I made a decision to not wait with Columbus and instead just use the strategic territory immediately. One benefit of this is that I can just keep all of my defense cards in hand if I want to. Of course, I get some new cards now that I might want to keep in hand, but if I don't see that, I definitely want to keep it in hand as a backup colony, and then I have to discard a colonization card already. And yeah. But at the end, I actually went for it immediately because I do think getting those draws that early could potentially be strong. And I also thought that actually, with me now not having the ability to go for the iron, I thought that actually the 2 additional strength and also the additional draws that I did now have could really put a little bit of pressure on especially RutgerHauer. Funestus not really with having Nostradamus, of course, but RutgerHauer is still on 2 military actions. And ideally, he would really love to go for something like alchemy or iron now, I would say. But if he does that, even if he takes the strength from Saladin, after building this knight, I will be at 10 strength. I have not drawn 3 H2 cards. I have a war and an aggression in hand. I will actually only keep the war, but Rutger knows that I had some H2 draws. I do think he has to be extremely careful, and I do also think that it would be quite painful for him to invest into something like Swordsman, just to be safe from an aggression, or maybe Knights, if he has a Knights tactic instead of something like Legion. So, yeah, I just wanted to put a little bit of pressure on him, and if he isn't careful, maybe I can go for this war, or maybe I get a bit lucky and draw with my 2 cards in aggression. And so I was willing to put this strategic territory into play immediately. With getting the additional draws, at least it gets more likely to draw another colony quickly, meaning that then the Suez Canals may be a relatively quickly viable option if I get another colony. After investing into those knights, I have 4 civil actions left. I could consider going for the Universitas here, because I have the engineering genius, and it's just a wonder this is there now. But now with having the strategic territory, with maybe the Suez Canal getting an option as soon as I draw a colony, and also ocean liner service and Harvard being there, again, didn't want to block myself from a wonder. And with that, I just prepared myself for potential coal upgrades, went for the rich land and the efficient upgrade, as I think I don't necessarily need any of those other cards. And so I just to go for those 2 cards, and if I should get a chance to get in a relatively early coal, those cards will be quite valuable. I said we'll keep the war, just in case RutgerHauer leaves himself at a bit of a tricky position. Maybe I can punish him. I then don't draw an aggression, so maybe he could get away with maybe playing it a bit greedy if he leaves himself, at least with the option to increase his strength a bit at the next turn to be prepared for war. I was very happy to see that I have a vast territory in hand now, because that means that if the Suez Canal should be available, I definitely can just go for it without having to worry to not have a colony to actually make use it nicely. And as you can see, Rutger indeed invests into the swordsman, meaning 4 science gone before he can invest into any upgrades. So I do think this little strength push really forced him into maybe into a bit of an annoying play for himself. He is now at 6 strength, is still the weakest, even if he should now decide to take the strength from Saladin. He then takes the cavalryman to have another military technology in hand, takes the engineering genius, and then also takes the urban growth at the next turn. At least thanks to the cultural heritage, he still can go for the alchemy. Like this, can get some cards out of his hand also with the urban growth, so that's at least fine. He actually makes the decision to take the strength from Saladin, because with 6 strength he would have still needed 2 defense cards, and maybe he wasn't willing to take the risk if he doesn't have 2 colonization cards. Then it's Funestus' turn. He will see the historic territory is revealed. I have some colonization cards, and I was willing to bid at least 1 unit in the 2 cards, especially with knowing that the Suez Canal is in there, and I was actually quite happy to see that I win it for 3. With not knowing about any other colonies, I made a decision to use a warrior on both of my cards instead of trying to keep one of those cards in hand, just making it that I have to pay a few resources to rebuild my unit, which I kind of want to do immediately at my next turn. And now I have already 2 colonies, the vast territory 2 in hand, so the Suez Canal might actually get quite a strong option if it is revealed. Funestus also goes for wonder, has some iron production, is at 3 science production, which is fine, but with the Harvard College he will be at 6, and that leaves him with a very nice science production. Then needs only either selective breeding or maybe ocean liner service, or just going for the irrigation, and then he has basically every part of his economy nicely covered. And he then also starts going for swordsman upgrades to get a little bit stronger, maybe avoiding to be the weakest, which after maybe I potentially increase my strength again, which could be an indicator that there are actually some strength events coming, but of course he didn't have Nostradamus for the whole time, so he doesn't have knowledge about the whole deck. Maybe it's also just because he is afraid of some unknown events. Now it is my turn. I don't use my politics phase, I can't go for a war really, and the vast territory I want to keep in hand for the Suez Canal. I will then rebuild my warrior. There's no early coal in the row. With an early coal, maybe I could have considered to just go for a coal upgrade and then not rebuild the warrior yet, but with that I will just rebuild the warrior. And then after using Columbus, it's of course ideal to get a new leader as quickly as possible, and even though Newton with alchemies is not ideal, he still can save me a bunch of civil actions, which is very nice, and one science production, getting that now is also not too bad. I always maybe have at least a potential to go for something like journalism at some point, and so instead of waiting for potential better leader, I just made a decision to go for Newton now, and I do think he's actually quite fine, even though I have only alchemies, because I'm only on 5 civil actions. I missed out on the Code of Laws, and then it will be Newton will just be a nice benefit to have some more civil actions to work with. Then I do think the reserves is a very nice pickup, with me being on bronze mines and also allowing me to maybe get an additional population out. That is just a very valuable card for me, maybe makes it a bit easier to go for a Suez Canal potentially at some point. And then with the remaining 2 civil actions I have now some hand space issues, and there's only one really nice way to make space in my hand, that is to use the urban growth to build a religion. Maybe not ideal, but at least it makes me safe from a rebellion, it increases my culture production by a little bit, and also it maybe will be relevant at some point for the Acropolis. And also with having this religion now, which is kind of forced, if I want to play my turn like this, then I made the decision that with my last civil action I will actually pick the organized religion, because while there is Pierre in the game, it's just a happy face solution that is available now. I have this religion now, after having built it with the urban growth, and both of my opponents have bread and circuses in hand, so Pierre might be heavily contested anyway, so I thought just go for organized religions now instead of hoping to get team sports or something like that is the better idea. I have now again a full hand. I do think maybe I made a mistake with not developing the organized religions. I'm not sure on that, because for now I don't need the happy faces, so it could be that if I develop it now and then there are cards like justice system or strategy, maybe I will regret having invested for science into it already. On the other hand, if you take a look at my opponents, RutgerHauer is at 2 science plus 2, funestus, who also had Nostradamus, is at exactly 4 science. It is kinda looking like maybe Dark Ages could be in there. I do think I didn't have knowledge about this. So with that, I think there's maybe some merit in just using Newton now to develop that for free. But at the end I made a decision against it. But I do think maybe that is a small misplay here. Then I will draw 2 cards, 2 colonization cards, interestingly. So if there's some more colonies coming, I could be nicely prepared to win those. Maybe this game could still turn into quite a nice colonization game. RutgerHauer will play the cultural heritage in order to be able to go for the alchemy, uses the urban growth to go for 1 upgrade for free, and then is willing to take the call for 3 civil actions, which I do think is quite understandable, because I also I'm still in bronze mines, so if he doesn't take it, I will have the chance to go for an early coal, and now he potentially removes this option from me and also has the coal available for himself. He then goes for some upgrades, 2 more upgrades from warriors to swordsman, is now 10 strength, making it that funestus is now the weakest, who nicely makes it to not see it, but still using his politics phase nicely with having this international trade agreement, getting an additional resource production, where RutgerHauer will get an additional food production. Funestus will then just finish the Harvard College, takes the reserves, plays the resource for resources, and then takes the rich land, is not willing to take the selective breeding, or maybe the cannons, instead just doing some relatively efficient actions, has still this irrigation, if he should miss out on both copies of selective breeding, and taking cannons for 3 if he doesn't have a tactic is definitely quite expensive, so I do think that makes some sense. The architecture maybe also could have been an interesting card with not having built any urban buildings yet, but a rich land of course also could just be a very efficient card. Then he will go for some upgrades, again making it that he's not the weakest, maybe indicating that he has indeed some knowledge about some strength events. Now it is my turn. I don't want to use my politics phase, and this turn I kind of have to make space in my hand. Now I will develop the organized religion anyway, probably I should have already done it at the turn before. It's a bit tricky because there are riflemen and cannons in a row, and I kind of would like to have both of those copies, but I do think taking both of them is quite expensive. It's definitely not impossible. I could use now the efficient upgrade to upgrade 1 religion to organized religion, only costing me 1 resource, which is exactly enough to get me out of corruption. Then I have exactly enough hand space to go for riflemen and cannons. But yeah, it's still very costly. There's a selective breeding available for only one civil action, which I kind of also would like to take. The architecture could be a very interesting technology to have, with having Newton and having maybe some spare science available, and also still being in low resource production. So at the end I made a decision that I would rather want to take only one out of those two cards, and then I do think that's a relatively clear decision towards the Rifleman, or not a completely clear decision, because when we take a look at my opponents, RutgerHauer and funestus are both on swordsmen, so there's maybe some hope to be had that the Rifleman could still be available for me the next turn, but it might still be taken. Maybe as a preparation for H3 tactics, this copy might be discarded before my next turn anyway, or will actually for certain be discarded. Funestus only has to take pay one civil action. Very likely to take this copy of Rifleman and then deny the option to go for stronger infantry units for myself. So with having some warriors already that I can upgrade, I made a decision to go for the Rifleman. I will actually discard the Conquistador tactics because I want to keep both colonization cards and the colony in hand at the end. It's not such a great tactic anyway. So this tactic is not a reason to go for the Rifleman, but just because I can upgrade some warriors to Rifleman. And with that, I made a decision to, after going for the selective breeding, investing into it, going for one upgrade, making a bit of space in my hand, making it that I can for certain use this rich land 1. I then have 3 civil actions left, which I will use to take the Rifleman, and also the architecture, which I do think can be a very valuable card for myself. Then I said, I really don't want to discard any of those colonization cards, and also not a vast territory. Sadly, with going for this turn, but there was also not a relatively easy way around it, apart from just going for an upgrade to Rifleman, but that also could have been heavily punished. As you can see, I do actually draw the mobile artillery, which of course made me a bit unhappy about my decision. I do think taking the Rifleman was maybe still the nicer decision, but now of course in hindsight taking the cannons would have been even better, but I still have the chance to go for a second copy of cannons, so I was just hoping that maybe I will still be able to go for this tactic, and I was still very happy to have it available. And yeah, the problem is that now after my turn it will actually be weakest, so I was a bit afraid that maybe I could get punished by a strength event if RutgerHauer now makes the decision to cede, but he doesn't. Instead he will go for the Revolutionary Idea, definitely a card that is very valuable for him, with still needing a lot of science. He then will develop the Bread and Circuses, takes the efficient upgrade, and thanks to the Revolutionary Idea he's just enough science to start going for coal upgrades at the next turn. Interestingly, he lets go on this copy of cannons, making it that he maybe has to hope to get a second one, or could also be an indicator that he has already a tactic like Classic Army or Hussars available. As you can see, there's actually a Suez Canal coming down the row, which will at least stay in the 2 civil action area for funestus, so it would be quite a costly denial. And I was really hoping to see that at my next turn, because thanks to the architecture and with Newton being able to develop it for free, I actually can take and finish the Suez Canal at the same turn, which could be very strong, so I was kind of hoping that funestus doesn't go for any denial pick here. Funestus cedes. Sadly, there's actually a strength event revealed. The Crusades, maybe not the most important one, still of course a little bit annoying. Funestus will then go for the Bread and Circuses, develops the irrigation, builds 1 Bread and Circuses, upgrades 1 farm, upgrades another farm, and then takes the cannons. Maybe he could have even done the decision to build a third farm already instead of going for 2 upgrades, maybe building 1, upgrading 1, because probably he definitely wants to take the cannons, but maybe it's also fine to not commit to a 3rd farm yet. But the question is, what does he want to do with the rich land now? And if he plans to build a 3rd farm, maybe he could have done it already. But it's maybe also nice to still have a free pop available instead of having all population committed. Especially, of course, if he has knowledge about something like pestilence. Now it is my turn. Suez Canal wasn't taken away, and I first of all won't push because I'm the weakest. I will remain the weakest, but I didn't want to risk something like Call to Arms being revealed, which would destroy this nice Suez Canal turn, and I do think that it's just such a nice turn that I will definitely go for it. I can develop the architecture, take the Suez Canal, use the engineering genius in the first step, play the reserves, and after that, thanks to the architecture with my last civil action, I can finish the Suez Canal. And thanks to having the selective breeding developed, the 4 food from the vast territory will not cause any corruption issues. I will just have exactly enough to get out of corruption. So a very pleasant turn, which I do think is just too strong to go for something different. Even though there are some downsides to it, the justice system will be gone, meaning I will remain on 5 civil actions for a while, but I thought with having Newton maybe that is fine, and with not investing 7 science into the justice system, maybe it will be a bit easier for me to go for something like an H3 government form, which would be very nice with the Acropolis. Strategy for 3 maybe could have been interesting, but also quite expensive, and RutgerHauer at least doesn't have a lot of science. If funestus gets it, that's a very strong card for him, so a bit bad, but at the end I do think this turn is just too strong. I'm not 6 resource production, still have the efficient upgrade to maybe go for coal upgrades, have a very strong yellow bank, and 5 science production, so definitely a fine position. Not the most civil action yet, but with Newton and the Acropolis, maybe the chance to fix that as soon as I get a chance to get maybe an H3 government form or something like civil service. I keep the colonization cards in my tactic. I draw even another colonization card and another colony, which I could potentially think about pushing into the deck. RutgerHauer Seeds, and as you can see, actually another strength event revealed, the Uncertain Borders, which I sadly will lose, which is of course bad. On the other hand, in this situation, maybe it doesn't hurt as badly because my yellow bank is still quite nice, and so I do think it's somewhat fine in this situation. Of course, still nice for RutgerHauer to get the additional yellow token into the bank. Also, we can see now why funestus definitely played around some strength events. There have now been the Crusades and the Uncertain Borders already revealed. RutgerHauer will play the Revolutionary Deer, could now go for some coal upgrade, but makes the decision to go for something different, and he will actually make the decision to take Robespierre, elect him, go for Conmon, develop the Conmon, now having a lot of civil actions and also 5 or soon 4, actually that's not an open borders agreement. Of course, because of Robespierre, he is 5, so he has now some very nice civil and military actions to work with. Takes the strategy in hand, which is maybe rather denial pick than actually being able to use it for himself. Of course, at some point it might still be nice to have it, and then he takes the breakthrough and also goes for one more upgrade. The downside of this play is, of course, that he doesn't have enough science to go for coal the next turn, but we will soon see that there will maybe be some help from the event deck, and if he had knowledge about it, then this turn of course makes even more sense. But of course, if he goes for coal, then his government will be delayed. Maybe the government is for now more important than the additional resource production. And Robespierre is relatively late, so it's now a relatively nice transitional leader. And now it's funestus' turn. He will push an H2 event into the deck, and as you can see, there's immediately the scientific breakthrough revealed, giving all players some additional science. Funestus has now quite a bunch of science saved up, will also nicely be able to go for an H2 government form, will also go for the navigation, which is interesting. He had Nostradamus. That is looking like there might be some colonies coming, which could make it that I maybe again want to keep as many colonization cards in hand in my next turns as possible. Now it is my turn. I'm actually this turn not the weakest, so I can push an event into the deck. I definitely thought about pushing the historic territory into the deck to get another colony for my Suez Canal, but I don't really need the happy faces that much, and funestus just went for the navigation, can keep an additional card in hand thanks to the library, can easily soon get additional military actions if there is a nice card in H3 with as many signs that he's having. So at the end I rather seeded the civil unrest, using the chance to seed with not being the weakest and also putting an event into the deck that at least has the potential to hit my opponents. RutgerHauer soon will lose 2 yellow tokens, also funestus if maybe one of them will decide, or both of them, to not build a bread and circuses immediately, then of course they could get punished. But of course funestus sees now with Nostradamus that this event is coming, so he will maybe make sure to be prepared for it. The event revealed is actually another science event, so RutgerHauer, after having not enough science to go for the coal, has now more than enough science to go for the coal, and now the strategy out of the sudden is of course also not looking like a pure denial pick, but also rather like something that might actually be nice for him. Now it's my turn. I have 5 civil actions, and now I get a second chance to take the cannons, which I will definitely use with having the mobile artillery in hand. As you can see, there's also a coal on the roll, and I could potentially just take the coal, develop it for free with Newton, go for an upgrade, maybe then increase my population, build a knight or something like this. I do think that could be a very fine turn, would get me out of corruption. I could also, if I don't want to build a knight, even though building a knight with this tactic is definitely not bad, but I could also not use the efficient upgrade if I don't want to commit to another knight, but I do think it's nice to build this knight anyway if I go for this line. However, I'm already on 6 resource production, and I can also now use the opportunity to already build a cannon, reveal the tactic, making myself actually the strongest, which could have some benefits, or even stronger maybe, so that I remain also the strongest for a bit longer. Revealing the tactic also makes it that I can keep all of my colonization cards in hand, which could be nice, because as said, funestus just went for the navigation. There might definitely be an H2 colony coming potentially. And Also, if I invest 7 science into coal, definitely could make it a bit more tricky for me to go for an H3 government farm, or maybe also civil service. So I did think that going for coal could still be nice. Maybe I should do it, but I at the end thought it's maybe not necessarily needed with being at 6 resource production. Of course, the blue tokens could get a bit of a problem with just stone bronze mines, but I at the end was willing to do this. Go for one cannon. Real the tactic, actually get out of corruption with using the rich land to go for second food upgrade. Maybe I don't need the food that urgently, but there is a red cross in the game, and it could still be nice to just go for this upgrade now a bit quicker. And then with the last civil action, I make the decision to not even pick up the coal, and instead just go for the breakthrough, because I thought it's just, there maybe will just be some better options available. And so I rather wanted to have the additional science from the breakthrough. And also with that denied science from RutgerHauer, who, even though he has now a lot of additional science, I mean, probably he's now relatively fine with the science. So, yeah, that was this turn. I do think it's a bit of an interesting decision to skip the coal, but also I do think perfectly understandably, because the upgrade from 6 to 8 resources is not that important. The next upgrade will already be relatively late. Of course, it could still be nice, especially making it a bit easier with the blue tokens, but it also makes it that I can't use my military actions now while still being in H2, revealing the tactic, meaning that I can keep all of the colonization cards in hand, are just some nice benefits, and so at the end I made the decision to just skip the coal here. And then keep all of the defense cards. I draw another colony, so if I maybe are still the strongest the next turn, I could consider pushing this one into the deck. H3 starts, RutgerHauer goes for the strategy, and he could just, actually, he just can't go for the coal if he wants to go for the strategy, which maybe he wants to do to avoid being the weakest. Yeah, that now with this decision he can't go for the coal quite yet, but he can still invest his resource into something nice with going for the ocean liner service. Thanks to the efficient upgrade, he can still go for a coal upgrade at the next turn, even though he has now very low resources. And then he will use the ocean liner service, takes the urban growth for some additional resources. He leaves himself with one unhappy worker, could get punished by the civil unrest potentially. And yeah, I do think the ocean liner service is still quite strong. For him, he has only irrigation, at least with some additional food also from the International Trade Agreement Pact. But the ocean liner service, of course, still quite strong. And while he can't go for the coal, he at least invests his resource into something else that is quite nice. Now we are at the beginning of H3, so we can maybe take a look at the overview. And yeah, we can see that funestus has a little bit of a culture lead, and generally his position, I think, is looking quite strong, because he has 6 science production, 7 resource production with the pact, has now 3 irrigation farms, and some frugalities in hand, can easily get some additional population out, has cannons, has now the chance to take the cavalryman. Will now has the chance to maybe go for Bach and opera, just go for Gaudian journalism, has some options for his leaders to get even more culture, and also the big thing is, thanks to his very big science production, if he gets the chance to get an early H3 government form, he has more actions, and that would boost his position even more. But at the moment he is still a bit limited on actions, has now to spend some actions to go for leader, so he has some things to do, and maybe that could be a bit annoying, but he has the culture lead, and his economy is definitely looking quite strong. While I have even fewer civil actions, at least I have Newton, so the amount of civil actions may be relatively equally. I have a bit less resource production, maybe I have some more issues with my blue tokens. My food production is probably better, and also I have a very nice yellow bank, and I have already a happy face solution developed. I also have some science saved up, and an H3 government form would also give me a nice boost, and I also have already a nice tactic revealed, while from funestus we don't know yet if he has a nice tactic to work with or not. So I do think my position is definitely not bad. I'm a little bit in culture behind, but I definitely might find some ways to catch up. Funestus has also some resource more saved up, which definitely makes a bit of a difference. So I would value his position probably more, but my position is not that far behind that I can't have any hope to overtake him. And RutgerHauer is at the moment equally in culture with me, but will maybe very, very slowly potentially fall behind. But of course, depends just on how much we will now build up some culture productions. At the moment, he's relatively equal in culture with me. Can start going for coal mines, but those will be relatively late. Has a lot of civil and military actions, which is nice. So I also think his position is very playable, especially with also having the ocean liner service now. So I do think at this point, maybe funestus has the strongest position, but every position has potential, and depending on if maybe there are some interesting H3 options available early, like a government farm, or for me maybe something like computers, for funestus, maybe something like oil could be interesting. That might then be shaping the position a little bit in the next turns, or might play a part in how nicely the civilizations will be able to develop. Funestus seeds, I was happy to see that there is actually a strength event coming. Funestus has to pay something to me now, and he actually makes the decision to pay resources, which of course I was very happy to see. Now I out of the sudden have 9 resources available, which definitely makes a bit of a difference, and he probably didn't want to pay food to me, because even though maybe that one doesn't really help me that much, it would mean that he can't use any frugality this turn, would have some issues to fix his uprising issues, would have to disband something. So thanks to this situation, he's actually willing to pay me something different and goes for the resources. He will take the cavalryman, so probably means that he doesn't have something like defensive army or fortifications, will develop them even already, maybe as a tactic for them in hand, takes Bach in hand, increases population, and then goes for an arena. And fixes his happy faces for the civil unrest, doesn't elect Bach yet, and also takes Bach without the opera, which is interesting. I do think maybe just going for Gaudi could be an interesting decision then. However, maybe his part of his decision was actually to leave those computers in 3 for me instead of for 2, because I do think those computers have the potential to give my position now quite a big boost, and I was definitely eyeing them coming down the road. I have some issues maybe to get out of corruption, so them being available for 2 instead of 3 might actually make quite a bit of a difference for me. So maybe just because of that, and because Bach still has some potential, he maybe was willing to go for Bach here. Not electing him makes it a little bit suspicious that maybe something like iconoclasm could be coming here, but if we take a look at the turn, I do think it was maybe somewhat tricky to... No, actually not. Maybe Funestus is trying to trick us here with playing a turn where it looks like at the end you have to increase pop, build an arena. But he could have just not developed a cavalryman. With using those frugalities, he doesn't really have any hand spice issues. So maybe he developed a cavalryman to maybe be better prepared for arms industry. No, actually, his turn is not over. He will build a cavalryman, and then if he wants to play his turn like this, that is also needed to get out of corruption, then he indeed needs all of his civil actions to be spent. So Bach could be an indicator, not electing Bach, that there is iconoclasm coming, but it's definitely not guaranteed. This turn would also make sense without any iconoclasm considerations. And so with that, with me being the strongest at my turn, I made a decision to push here. However, this decision will definitely change my turn, and also maybe how strong I think my civilization is looking, because as I said, those computers are looking very nicely. Thanks to Newton, I can take them, develop them, and potentially even go for 2 upgrades, or maybe go for 1 upgrade, increase population, build a unit, which maybe could even be more interesting. One of those plays could be quite strong. I would have a lot of science production with Newton and prepared for leaders like Sid Meier and Einstein, and I think my civilization would definitely have quite some potential. So this is looking quite nice, but I am the strongest. I have some colonization cards. Winning in our colony when I might win the tiebreakers could potentially be nice, especially with having the Suez Canal, and so I made the decision to push. However, the event that is revealed is actually the iconoclasm, and I was quite unhappy to see this. Maybe I shouldn't have seen it, but I think with being the strongest, it was definitely not unreasonable to push, especially with having also 3 H2 defense cards already in hand to potentially fight for the colony, with the colony also not being revealed in the near future. So if it maybe is won by another player, it's maybe not too bad. And I was quite unhappy by this iconoclasm, because funestus didn't commit to leader yet, can just now start going for Bach. Maybe we'll even get a chance to get movies. At least Bach isn't giving him that much value for now, at least. But still has some potential with the movies being in the deck. And RutgerHauer, he did lose a leader, Robespierre, but that leader isn't really costing him a lot. He has 6 military actions now anyway, so the 1 military action that he loses doesn't really make a big difference. And for me, this makes actually an extremely big difference, because now I can still go for computers, develop them, and go for 1 upgrade, but without Newton, the science increase is just not nearly as big as now as it would have been with Newton. And also, I don't get a civil action back, meaning after doing that, I would not be able to increase my population. I would not be able to go for 2nd upgrades. I would have some big corruption, and with that I actually made the decision that now going for computers is not no longer any worthwhile, and I did think that this was quite a bit of a setback, and I was not Now, I was thinking that my position loses a bit of potential now. But I still have a bunch of science which I can maybe use to go for government form. So there's still some nice ways to maybe build up my civilization in the next turns. I will now play my turn with increasing my population, taking the military build up. When I don't go for computers, the question is how do I use my turn nicely? I now mainly used it to just use some civil actions on my civilization, but then at least wanted to use one civil action to take this military build up just because it has such insane potential in 3-player games, which with potentially giving 10 resources, maybe allowing me to bid an army for a colony if it is coming, and then use the military build up to rebuild relatively cheaply. And even if I only use it for 5 resources, I do think it's still a very nice deal. So I took this card and didn't want to pay 2 civil actions for one of those yellow cards. I didn't want to take this card and one of those, and I do think it's more important to use my civil actions now efficiently. And so I will increase my population. I will upgrade this religion, which I kind of have to do because of the civil unrest coming. Of course, I also can maybe use those happy workers. And then I will build one cannon to get out of corruption, making me the strongest, and just to get out of corruption. So I do think it's a somewhat solid turn, but it doesn't give me that big boost that maybe a Newton plus computer plays would have given me, also with preparing me for some more leaders. So I was a bit unhappy, but that is of course the risk when you push when there's an event that does quite disrupt your plans. But I do think with being the strongest, I maybe would just seed again if I would be in the same situation. RutgerHauer goes now for coal. It's still relatively late. He doesn't have the most science, but it might still be worth it, especially with being able to go for this upgrade with an efficient upgrade. He then takes the reserves, takes some more yellow cards with as many civil actions. He can maybe make up for his not that big resource production, and with not having that many resources available for now, with just taking a lot of yellow cards. Sadly, he will now also build a Britain circuses. At my turn, not only was I prepared for strength event, RutgerHauer also still had one unhappy worker, so if the civil unrest would have been revealed, he would have lost 4 culture and a yellow and a blue token, so not a reason for me to push. Funestus seeds now, the event revealed is now the civil unrest. Sadly now the players have fixed their happy faces, and so it's a neutral event at the end. And as you can see, there is a very strong leader coming down the road. Funestus isn't hesitating. He will elect Bach, but only to replace him immediately by Pierre. And after this Pierre, I really thought that with this iconoclasm and this early Pierre entering H3, I thought my position has some potential. And I thought I can maybe have some, definitely some winning chances. Now I was quite a bit less hopeful about my position. It's definitely not over. I have a nice tactic that I can work. I have some decent amount of science, but I still don't have the most civil actions. Now I don't have Newton any longer to make up for it. I actually have to pay some civil actions to get a new leader at some point. And I am behind in culture. Funestus will now increase his culture lead, will get the Olympic Games, still is just an extremely strong economy, has enough science to go for an H3 government form if he will get a chance. So I did think that now he might definitely have the strongest position, and it might be relatively hard to overtake him again. Now it is my turn. I will not push, even though I kind of would like to, because I'm the strongest, but the impact of culture it's just way too risky to commit to this. Even if I'm already starting to play for second place, I don't know how nicely RutgerHauer will set up his culture production, so I can't really use my politics phase that nicely. I could have maybe gone for an aggression if I then planned to increase my military actions, which I definitely did consider. Because, it's kind of the question, how do I approach this game? There are a lot of interesting military cards available for 3 civil actions. The military theory, the fundamentalism, especially with the Acropolis, could be interesting. There is a copy of Air Forces, which is of course very important. And I considered maybe going for military theory, leaving myself at least open for the democracy, but also preparing myself for war. But I don't have a war in hand yet. I thought about fundamentalism, but even if I developed a fundamentalism, I still miss one civil action to take a second one out of this card, so I can't go for military actions and the air forces. And taking one of them is also somewhat expensive. It doesn't really improve my position that much. I mean, having the military actions could be quite nice. Of course, having air forces, but if I then don't have something like military theory, I can't really make use out of maybe some nice strength potential unless I get either a chance to get one of those cards at the next turn still, or maybe just a second copy of military theory. So definitely something that I considered, just taking air forces here. But at the end, I made the decision that I will actually take neither of those cards and instead improve my civilization by a bit, which I'm also not that certain about if that is the best thing to do. In general, I found it a bit challenging to to really see how I will approach this game, because ideally I would definitely like to finish before funestus with having the tournament standings in mind. And so now I definitely used some time and wasn't really happy about any of the solutions. At the end I just went for 2 computer upgrades, which is quite nice on one hand, gets me out of corruption, but also I will be now very low on resources, so that is a bit of a problem. And also I had some science saved up already, so maybe I won't actually need all of the science, but maybe if I get a government farm, maybe also a chance to get like something like civil service, I can get a big boost, or maybe still going for something like military theory or fundamentalism could be interesting. So actually, also at the end I just went for this. I could then increase my population at the next turn. That however would mean that I can't increase my population another time at the next turn, which is maybe actually not that relevant in this position because I have already some free pop and I also don't have a lot of civil actions, so being able to use an additional civil action on my civilization at the next turn is maybe not that necessary. And with that I do think that it probably was a mistake to, with my last civil action, take the efficient upgrade here, because I can maybe use it to go for a third computer. If I maybe get Sid Meier at some point, then it might be a somewhat fine yellow card. Maybe it could still be somewhat nice to go for oil at some point, even though it's now probably already a bit too late. So I don't actually know why I really wanted to have this efficient upgrade. Maybe I wanted to be able to increase my population 2 times at the next turn, but if so, I do think that's not really needed, and I should just increase my population and then have one more free civil action at one of the following turns, because at the moment it's just too dubious on how I can actually use this efficient upgrade, and with that I do think that is a mistake here. I will keep the Impact of Culture at least in hand. I am willing to discard a colonization card, maybe a mistake, but if I get Sid Meier, the Impact of Culture might still be very strong, and I could quite regret having discarded it. Now it's RutgerHauer's turn. He now, of course, with having many civil actions, has the chance to prepare for the military, will get a copy of Air Forces, so not taking it definitely could backfire. Could have taken it, maybe could have hoped to get one of those copies. RutgerHauer at least isn't really inclined to take them away. funestus probably wants to take the military theory, maybe then doesn't go for the fundamentalism, could maybe go for it as a denial. So maybe I could have gone for something like this, but I also don't have any war in hand, so at the end I do think it was a fine decision to go for those computers, but also not that nice, because maybe I don't need the science as much, but could still be nice for a bunch of impacts, so I at the end rather went for those computers. But I was relatively unclear about which direction I should actually choose in this game. funestus seeds an event, opens the Cold War, which I was happy to win, but on the other hand maybe I don't need the science as much, but of course I will take it. The democracy is in a row, allowing funestus to get an even bigger boost, making my hopes to maybe finish before him even less. He will get the military theory thanks to the Cold War. He has more than enough science to also go for the military theory soon and be nicely prepared for the military, especially if he has a tactic. In worst case, he can always use my mobile artillery tactic. He will develop the cannons already. Again, or maybe indicating that something like arms industry could be coming, but maybe also to just use the civil action already. Now it is my turn, and I have now kind of a decision to make. And I don't think it's a very difficult decision or anything, but maybe one that it's not maybe a bit a decision that I don't want to make, and that is that from now on I just have to play for the second place. If you take a look at the overview, I do think it's relatively clear. Maybe I could try something with the military, but I don't have a lot of resource saved up. Maybe if I somehow manage to use the military build up nicely, but I don't even have a war in hand. So with the tournament standings in mind, I would kind of play it, and I would really like to finish before funestus. But in this situation, with having this drawn as international tourism, I made the decision to just offer this to him. At least I will probably still get a bit more culture out of this than him. Maybe there's a small risk that he would reject, but I think there's still enough turns left that it's very likely that he will just accept it, with there maybe being a small danger that he will just offer it to RutgerHauer at the next turn. If I offer to RutgerHauer, we maybe will get the same amount of culture out of it, but I just wanted to increase my chances to finish before him, finishing at the second place, and at this point I had basically given up on the first place. You never know what might happen, but I didn't see how I will manage to finish before funestus in this game, and so I just offered the international tourism to him to get a bit of additional culture against RutgerHauer. Now it is my turn. There's still no new leader on the row, so after Fleming and Bier have been revealed, sadly the other leaders, I have been a little bit shy, which is a bit bad for me and RutgerHauer. I will now take the military theory, and yeah, again, it was again a bit unclear for me what should I actually do. I can't really invest into something nice, so I just thought it is maybe nice to set up a little bit of military pressure. I have the options with having some military actions available to be a bit threatening. There might be some Olympic Games at some point, but could still be nice to maybe be prepared for it, so I went for the military theory. I have to get somehow out of corruption, so I will build a knight. I will then I don't want to miss out on any draws, so I will go for the military theory. I will actually also take the fundamentalism now. I could have maybe developed the fundamentalism instead of the military theory, maybe even both, but developing the fundamentalism would give me an additional civil action immediately. But with not having any wars, I kind of didn't want to block myself from the second copy of democracy. On the other hand, maybe I should just commit to it now. It's just a bit of a tricky spot. It was difficult for me to decide on what to do. I at the end will increase my population, build another knight to get me out of corruption, and then take the fundamentalism in hand. And yeah, maybe I could have just developed the fundamentalism instead of the military theory and then increase my population another time. Then I don't have to build this knight. Every bit of additional strength that I will get maybe makes it less likely that I will be able to use the military build-up on the other hand. Of course, it also makes me more threatening to Rutger, maybe forcing him to build some military, maybe more than he would ideally like to build. So yeah, with that, maybe I should develop the military theory, the fundamentalism, even in addition to the military theory, which I could have done. But I also kind of didn't want to block myself from the democracy. I still don't have a war in hand. If I would have some wars and aggressions in hand, I probably would do it. But with not having any of those cards in hand, I wanted to leave myself a bit more better prepared to also just continue the game peacefully and didn't want to commit to the fundamentalism yet. But I definitely wanted to have this card in hand, have a lot of science, and maybe I could have even developed it and still have gone for the democracy if it is available, but at the end I made a decision to not commit to the fundamentalism yet. I will now draw some cards, which I of course was interesting to see, maybe some impacts or maybe a war. There is an aggression now, also a tactic that I could maybe use, but I also have 3 knights now, so maybe not the greatest card, but at least a blunder maybe that could potentially be playable if RutgerHauer isn't careful. RutgerHauer offers a military alliance, so while I have the International Tourism Pact with funestus, RutgerHauer will now have the military alliance with funestus. He will develop the cavalryman, blaze the patriotism, builds 2 of them, takes the endowment, the revolutionary idea, the efficient upgrade, the patriotism just takes a lot of yellow cards, which I do think makes a lot of sense, doesn't have the most science, and just preparing himself nicely for the military might be important now, but of course for him it's a bit tricky, because I at least have some culture production now, so he's slowly falling behind, but the gap at this point is not really that big, so with 1 nice impact it might already be close, but of course I meant to also have some impact, so from his perspective I definitely would be a bit worried about just now being forced to react to some military and then maybe falling behind. But at this point, he's also not really that much behind in culture. Now it is Funestus' turn. He will push. He won't use the Olympic Games. The Ravages of Time are revealed. Sadly, I have to lose the Acropolis before having the chance to go for an H3 government form, but the discount for me is not that big anyway, so yeah, it's a little bit bad maybe, but also not too bad. Funestus will lose the library, blaze the wave of nationalism for 6 resource, goes for the military theory, destroys the lab even, and then builds 2 cannons, making full use out of the additional military resources. It has the corruption, but it's maybe not too bad for him. Then also takes the fast food chains to have a nice wonder available. Also makes it that he overtakes me in strength, maybe giving myself the chance to use the military build-up this turn for at least 5 resources. At my turn, all of my impacts are not looking that great, or not like I can easily commit to one of them, while the impact of competition is somewhat fine against Rutger at the moment. As soon as he just builds up upgrades to modern infantry or some stuff, it might be quite a bad impact for me, so I made a decision to just go for a blunder against Rutger, maybe at least removing one of his defense cards, maybe increasing my chances a little bit to win the strategic territory that is now coming. And yeah, so that blunder is defended, but at least 1 colonization card, maybe some other cards that could be somewhat viable are gone. And as you can see, this turn I will go for Einstein. And again, a tricky turn where I didn't really know how much do I maybe build up some military. Do I want to do some nice stuff apart from building some military? And I do think I kind of need to with having no war and aggression in hand. And so I do think going for Einstein is nice, just allowing me to spend some additional culture, get some additional culture already now, get a leader going now, get a bit of more science production, which I probably don't need, and just getting the potential to score some culture instead of maybe waiting for something like Sid Meier. So I will go for Einstein. While spending the civil actions to take and elect him makes it quite a bit tricky to also use the military build up nicely to maybe get 5 additional resources now. So at the end I actually made a decision to play the fundamentalism now. And maybe it's a mistake what I'm doing here, because I will now grab the reserves for 2. And I will at least build a cannon. I will have corruption, but at least one resource and 1 food corruption. But instead of taking the reserves for some additional resource, maybe I could have played the military build-up now. On the other hand, of course, there's still at least a chance that I maybe can still use the military build-up. But maybe the chance is not that high with me going for now quite a respectable amount of strength. So maybe I could have also just used the military build-up and then increased my population to get out of corruption instead of taking the reserves. At least I take the reserves away from RutgerHauer, limiting his amount of resource that he has available for the military. But it might not be that relevant at the end anyway, because at the moment I don't have a war in hand. Maybe we can hope to get a war, but I also think that RutgerHauer maybe has the chance to set himself up nicely enough. Depending, of course, on what tactic he has. So, yeah, I think it looks a little bit weird, but the reserves might be a viable card for RutgerHauer, so maybe it is fine to just take it. But maybe I should have just used, before developing the fundamentalism, just used the chance to use the military build-up and then increasing my population. I do think even though that would mean I have corruption, it could still be a bit more efficient than now taking the reserves for 2. But maybe I can still use the military build-up, then the reserves could still be viable, but I do think it's looking a bit weird. But generally I do think going for Einstein now, also committing to fundamentalism, I still thought about should I wait for democracy, but I also think the additional civil action from the fundamentalism might actually be quite viable, having that now available, not being any longer being stuck on 5. Maybe that should have been reason enough to already develop it at a turn before. At least now I could develop it with getting the culture from Einstein, so it maybe still worked out somewhat nicely. And maybe it could still be nice to leave myself open for democracy, but as said, I have still quite a nice amount of science, so maybe it's not out of... it's not... impossible, no, not unreasonable to maybe just go for democracy on top of the fundamentalism in case I don't need it any longer and maybe need some culture reduction more. This time my draw is a lot more interesting. Impact of agriculture looks interesting with RutgerHauer having the ocean liner service, and also the impact of balance is not that great at the moment for RutgerHauer. And also I have a war in hand, so in case RutgerHauer isn't careful, maybe doesn't find any way to defend himself, maybe I can actually go for war myself, even though I don't have the most resource available. So more than 1 air force, or maybe more than 1 more mobile artillery tactic is probably not possible for me. RutgerHauer plays the revolutionary idea, plays the endowment for 6 culture, and he will make a bit of a greedy turn. He will go for the movies, builds 1 with the urban growth, takes Chaplain, elects Chaplain, builds 1 cavalryman, and he has actually the shock troops tactic available. However, with going for this movie and Chaplain, which of course increases culture reduction by quite a lot, he, even with having the revolutionary idea in hand, has not enough science to go for both air forces and modern infantry the next turn with 10 science saved up. With not committing to the movies, that would have been possible. Then he maybe could have threatened to go for not outdated shock troops tactic with air forces, which would be maybe somewhat respectable. But now he can't do this. He has only 7 plus 4 resource available. Even with potentially some help from the event deck, his strength potential is just not that big. He can build 1 air forces maybe, which would give him plus 11 strength, putting himself at 40, maybe a little bit more with the swordsman, 42. But that would not even be enough to match my current strength. So maybe RutgerHauer just felt like he needs to take some risks to not fall behind too much. But again, he's not that much behind quite yet, and maybe the line that he is taking here is just a bit too greedy, because I luckily have drawn this war. I was very happy after I saw RutgerHauer's turn, because I kind of thought he will probably find some way to set up for a war, but then when I saw this, I really thought, good that I drew this war, because now not being able to punish RutgerHauer for this greedy line could really backfire. Maybe RutgerHauer just thought that he has to hope for something like this, maybe found that he didn't really like his position at all, if he has to be careful about the military for even another turn, so that those were probably his reasons, but I do think it's quite greedy, and I had a lot of draws, so I do think hoping for me not to have a war is maybe too greedy and more than the situation requires for. There are some situations where you just have to take these risks because you are just too much behind, but the situation maybe he was not that much behind that taking that risk would be needed. But now he has now 10 culture production. Funestus will now, maybe that was one part why RutgerHauer was willing to do that, will now declare the Olympic Games, which I of course was a bit unhappy to see because it might still be best for me to go for a war. But what I was very happy to see was the refugees. There's a strength event in the deck, and I'm actually able to win it. RutgerHauer will lose it, so quite a big swing between us. And after seeing this event, seeing that RutgerHauer didn't prepare himself nicely, I thought now maybe I have a nice way ahead of me into second place. Already before that, thought I at least have definitely chances, but I was now a lot more certain that I will maybe manage to score the second place, but definitely not the first one. Funestus is just too strong set up, and also he doesn't get air forces, but I don't think I can go for war against him. Maybe I could win a war, but I would have to go against the Olympic Games, and the culture gap is too big. It would just be a play where I will very likely end up at the last place. Instead, I do think I have to go against RutgerHauer here, with him leaving himself quite a bit vulnerable. I'm a bit lucky to have the chance to even get the air forces, even though the air forces are not that much needed. Those will increase my strength potential, but I also could have gone for another army, which wouldn't be a big difference. So I will go for the war. I will go for the air forces, develop them. I have a free population now, which is actually quite nice because it also saves me a civil action. I could have always disbanded a warrior, but it would have cost me 1 strength in the war. I will play the reserves for resources, build 1 air force. And if I then thought about first maybe disbanding a warrior, using 3 resources to build a knight, like this getting out of corruption or something like this, and then maybe taking a technology card to develop it with Einstein at the next turn. But I do think the best thing to do is to not disband any warrior, instead actually develop another technology now. The Rifleman scoring another 3 culture with Einstein, and then I don't have to disband anything. I can actually use the 3 resources to go for this upgrade, getting me out of corruption, being at 57 strength now. And also, in case the strategic territory is revealed, I can now bid it a little bit higher and give myself the chance to maybe even get a little bit of additional strength after having declared a war. And I thought about using the entrenchments tactic, and that actually brought myself the idea that I maybe can just go for riflemen anyway, also when I go for this mobile artillery war, because my through the ages instincts of course told me to build more of those units, but in this case it just, even with being at this tactic, makes I think the most sense to just go for this upgrade to riflemen. And with entrenchments I would have just 2 strength less from the tactic, so it's better to stay at the mobile artillery tactic. So I'm now at 57 strength in RutgerHauer. I didn't really say any way how he can go for anything nearly enough. H4 will start, and RutgerHauer will push. There is actually the strategic territory revealed. I was willing to bid my Rifleman and my card, and I was very happy to see that I actually went for the warrior in the card. Funestus isn't willing to bid. RutgerHauer only bids 2. Maybe doesn't have a lot of colonization cards. Maybe going for this blunder earlier on does actually have an effect right now. And here that means that I can win this colony for only a warrior, meaning that I have now not only 57 but even 60 strength for the war. RutgerHauer then will go for playing the Revolutionary Idea, going for air forces, playing patriotism, building an air force, going for 1 upgrade. Actually, interestingly, goes for an upgrade. Could have maybe also built an additional bread and circuses for 1 additional strength at least. Instead goes for those upgrades, maybe impact related, but I do think a bread and circuses maybe for the 1 strength could have been interesting. But of course it also depends on the impacts that he has knowledge about. Funestus will cede. Bit lucky that RutgerHauer didn't have opened the arms industry, instead a strategic territory. So he would have only gotten 2 resources, but maybe that would have led to him then building an arena. So nice that it is only revealed now. I will get 4 additional resources, which I maybe can use at my turn. Funestus finishes the fast food chains, I think for 23 points. He develops the bro sports, and then just will go for 2 upgrades, which helps him for impact of competition, architecture, and happiness. And also maybe strength if maybe RutgerHauer is disbanding something, or he is even overtaking him right now. Now it's my last turn, and I have some different options for my politics phase. There are 2 fine impacts that I can push, impact of agriculture and impact of balance, and there are 2 aggressions that I could go for. RutgerHauer has some chances to defend against him if he has 3 defense cards. He had to discard one already earlier with the blunder, so it's not likely that he can defend. But especially also because his colony bid was that low, but maybe he wanted to keep those defense cards in hand in order to be maybe able to defend against an aggression. But I just wanted to go for the most safe points, and with that played an impact into the deck, which is a bit risky because there are maybe some impacts that I will improve by quite a bit during my turn, like impact of happiness, for example. So because of that, I thought maybe I just play it safe in that regard and go for an aggression, but if then the aggression does nothing, that also isn't that great. So I do think all of those plays are fine. I at the end went for the impact of balance, which at the moment is a bit less good than the impact of agriculture, but it also is less easy for RutgerHauer to improve it. The impact of agriculture he could have improved by just building maybe 1 additional farm, which he maybe won't do anyway, because when we take a look at the civilization after building a movie, he doesn't have enough resource left to build a farm, but maybe depending on his impacts he could do something different than building a movie, maybe just a religion for variety, and then all of a sudden he might build a farm, and I just wanted to go for more save points, and because his science and food production is limiting his impact of balance, I thought that it is quite unlikely that he will improve this impact. And so I seeded this. I luckily didn't get punished by the impact. It only was the impact of wonders, which I was happy to see. And then I will this turn go for the civil service, which is nice for a bunch of impacts, scoring me 3 science with 3 culture with Einstein. I can also go for the mechanized agriculture, scoring even further 3 culture with Einstein. And then I can increase my population. I build an organized religion, then I will disband a knight. I'm still the strongest for impact of strength, and I will build another organized religion. I'm nicely set up for impact of harmony, impact of happiness. I increase my culture production a little bit, and also impact of architecture I'm nicely prepared for. So yeah, I do think that makes sense. I could have maybe seeded impact of agriculture and then somehow went for an additional farm or something, but I at the end just thought this is nice with having this harmony and just a lot of impacts being now very nice after this turn. And also when we take a look at the overview, it's just there are 2 big gaps between all of the players. I also didn't put too much thoughts into all of this. I can then reveal the tactic to be a bit stronger after my turn. RutgerHauer doesn't see it, will build an additional theater, so won't build an additional farm. He will then go for the bro sports, the Empire State Building, and then it's the end of his turn. And then before the final impacts, you can see the gaps are quite big, and I don't think there can be a lot of changes expected. The impact of government is revealed, so getting the civil service was quite nice, making that this impact is actually the best for me. Then we have the impact of harmony, so nicely that I prepared for that. It's actually plus 20 for every player. We then have the impact of variety, which is actually also the same amount of points for every player, plus 18 for everyone. We then have the impact of balance, which was seeded by me, giving myself and funestus 12, but RutgerHauer only plus 8. And then the last impact is the impact of population, giving me and funestus plus 14 and RutgerHauer plus 20, so that one was probably seeded by him. And then we have this final result where funestus is able to win the game with quite a bit of a lead, and I'm in the second position also with a bit of a lead. Not an ideal outcome, because of course I ideally would have liked to finish before funestus. Now, after the first batch of games is finished, so you remember the standings at the beginning, I am now at 12 points, funestus after this win is at 13.5 points. However, there have been also now already some games from the second batch finished, so when we take a look at the standings in a minute, there will already be some other games included, but after the first batch of games, funestus is basically in the lead, and I have to score more points than him in the second batch of games. And yeah, so not an ideal outcome, but I was still happy because during time snatch 3 I really thought, especially after losing Newton and then maybe the turns being a bit difficult with it being a bit difficult in which direction I should maybe go. I went for those computers just to go for some economical upgrades, but also of course to prepare for Einstein and Sid Meier. Maybe I didn't mention this earlier on enough, as of course one of the reasons to go for the computers with not having any leader. It's of course nice to be prepared for even more, for as many as possible. I had an interesting Suez Canal game on bronze mines, where I didn't went for cartography, just with Columbus winning 1 colony and then having vast territory in hand. I had a nice Suez Canal already going. And yeah, with that and with RutgerHauer playing this greedy turn towards the end, I was able to snatch the second place. Maybe I would have been able to finish second also if RutgerHauer would have played it more carefully. Maybe I would be able to score enough points, but definitely could be a bit tricky. So I was happy to have this war in order to punish RutgerHauer, and then that was in the end enough for the second place. Alright, and I do think this Iconoclasm was a bit of a turning point in the game. Maybe funestus would have won anyway. I do think he had quite a strong position, but after the Iconoclasm in the early pair, I almost lost all of the hopes to finish before him. Well, before that, as I said, I thought he is probably the better position, but there was still something possible. After that, I thought that I maybe had to play for the second place here. Alright, but now, as said, there are already 2 games from the second batch finished. My opponents, as it is sometimes the case, playing a bit faster than me. I at the moment don't have the time to do my turns very often during the day, so I'm the slowest player in the group. And now we can take a look at the current standings and how the other games finished where I wasn't involved. And in the 2 games where I wasn't involved, we can see that in one game Arne managed to win against Lech in RutgerHauer. So after losing the first 3 games, Arne now at least managed to bounce back with a win in his 4th game, which I was happy to see because he is definitely playing not any part in the fight for promotion. So it's definitely best for me to see him scoring some points in this game. Lech in the 2nd position, RutgerHauer loses this game. Then we have another game where Lech managed to win. funestus scored the 2nd position, which is good news for me that he didn't manage to win another game where I wasn't involved. And then RutgerHauer also finishes in this game in the last position, so his last 3 games didn't go that well for him. And with that we have at the moment the following standings. funestus is still in the lead with 15.5 points, so definitely still in quite a strong position. However, with the second place, I am in reach. I have 1 less game finished. If I manage to win my next game, I have already the chance to overtake him, but of course I also need to win this game, otherwise funestus is still ahead and still in a very nice position. Overall, the win of the season might be decided in the 2 games that I share with funestus. 2 out of the 3 remaining games, funestus is involved, so it will be heavily important to at least don't finish 2 times behind funestus. And just, of course, score as many points as possible. One player that also isn't completely out of the running yet is Lech, who is at the moment in the 2nd position, but already has 5 games finished. If he manages to win his last game, he's at 18 points, and if then the other results go very nicely for him, he definitely has still chances to also get still promoted. And then we have quite a bit of a gap from the 3rd to the 4th position. We then have Arne, who has 5 points, who has still some hope left with winning the last 2 games. He would be at 15 points, which could be enough to stay in the league. For RutgerHauer, however, his season in Master is over for now. He has only 1 game left, is at 3.5 points, and even if he wins this, his best bet is to maybe at least finish 4th in the group, but he definitely will get relegated. Alright, so with that, I hope you're excited for the second batch of games. The first one of those out of those games will probably finish today, because I now can just play my last turn, but I didn't want to show you the standings before now ending this game. There's another game so that I can use the website and not one of my screenshots, and can a bit more freely hop around here. And I hope you're looking forward to the second batch of games. And then with that, thanks for watching, have a nice time, and see you in the next video.